What's up everyone and welcome to a slightly delayed Warframe video. The topic of today's video, the Queen of the Glass and the sharpest tool in the arsenal. We are of course taking a look at Gara Prime. Gara's been a frame that's had all sorts of builds over the years, from the very defensive to completely passive damage. This one's going to be a very tanky but very active playstyle that absolutely slaughters everything around her. So what key abilities are we going to be relying on before we launch into build and playstyle? First ability, Shattered Lash. Tap to extend out a glass shard in front of you, or hold to do a sweeping glass shard attack in front of Gara, hitting any enemies in the way. This is affected not only by strength mods, but also the mods on the Shattered Lash Prime weapon. There's not a whole lot to this ability, but it does hit like an absolute truck when modded correctly. Second relevant ability is going to be Splinter Storm. Tap to cast the ability on Gara, adding a shield of glass around her which provides a large amount of damage reduction, capping out at a phenomenal 90%, or if you cast it on enemies, they will do direct damage to them. When the shield is applied to Gara, it will also do damage to enemies that touch the glass shards in a very sort of small AoE around Gara. And that becomes even more relevant when we take a look at her fourth ability, which is going to be Mass Vitrify. Mass Vitrify we're using mostly as a support ability for Splinter Storm. Casting it will refresh the timer instantly on Splinter Storm, and then when you destroy the ring of the Mass Vitrify, it will add damage to the Splinter Storm. This means that you can stack that damage to the point where you can just run through just about anything and kill them in high level content, while making sure that damage reduction never ever drops. Our Helmet ability is going to be Nourish, replacing Spectra Rage, and this is going to be a big part of our energy efficiency, while also throwing around a ton of viral procs. It is a brilliant ability and one we're going to leverage a fair bit. Her passive is also worth a mention because it has a chance to do a mini 10 meter radial blind upon ability cast, and since we're really pushing her as a caster frame, we're going to be triggering that quite a fair bit. It's a good bit of crowd control and can take some fire off you in a pinch. So how are we going to be making the most of our abilities with our build? Well, we're going to be going with a fairly standard triple umbral adaptation build, combining with the 90% damage reduction to make her ridiculously tanky. Streamline and Fleeting for efficiency to work with Nourish and allow us to use our abilities a ton. Prime Sure Footage so we're never knocked over. Corrosive Projection to deal with armor. Archon Continuity, which is going to boost the duration on Splinter Storm. And we're going to also link that up with the Toxin damage on Shattered Lash Prime, since that counts as inflicting Toxin procs with the ability. Then we're going to be using Archon Stretch for the additional range, but also the energy regen, which is going to be triggered by our Sentinel Diriger and its ability Arc Coil. Arcanes here are actually a little bit different to usual. Arcane Reaper is on here so that on a melee kill we regen health, and that will trigger on Lash kills, giving us essentially permanent healing up at all times. Then we have Arcane Fury for more melee damage upon a melee crit, which only has a 40% chance on the Arcane to proc, and we only have 40% base crit chance on the Lash before Blood Rush kicks in. But the thing is, since every instance of enemies being hit can trigger it, this actually is up pretty much the entire time and actually gives us a lot more benefit than it sounds. As for Archon Shards, 2 Tau Yellows for cast speed, since without them this is actually fairly painful to play, and then 3 Red Shards for duration to make her as, well, honestly, as brain dead to play as possible. There is absolutely no chance of losing that Splinter Storm damage or having your damage reduction drop. Something to note here though is that going above 2 Yellow Shards on her will absolutely break her Shattered Lash. For some reason, it causes it to have some monumental hitbox issues, something which you can mitigate with the use of only 2 of those yellow shards. However, things like the Teshin buff in the Conjunction Survival mission can still cause that to be a problem. However, those types of buffs are actually very few and far between, so you won't run into that issue very often. Just make sure not to go above 2 yellow shards. Then we have the build for Shattered Lash Prime. It's a fairly standard crit build for the most part. Prime Pressure Point for melee damage, Galvanized Steel for crit chance and stacking crit damage, Blood Rush for stacking crit chance, Gladiator Might and Organ Shatter for raw crit damage. Prime Reach does affect the ability, so it is a must pick. Primed Fever Strike to trigger the effect from Arcane Contumely. Then our final mod, which is Drifting Contact. The additional status chance is really nice, but also having that 10-second combo window means we don't have to take Naramon to make the timer longer, and really frees up our focus score for whatever we want. Our Arcane on here is going to be the fairly obvious melee exposure, gives us corrosive damage upon ability cast. Well, we're using a ton of abilities, it's a fairly big no-brainer on this melee. So what do I think of Gara Prime and her build since the change to the Pseudo-Exalted weapons? Well, she can't quite do some of the same bonkers things that she could do before, but honestly, I think she might be one of my favourite frames since the change. The gameplay loop is really satisfying. First recommendation, change the tap and hold for Gara Shattered Lash. You are focusing entirely on that wide sweeping attack, and pressing and holding to cast for the entirety of a mission will drive you insane. When you have that done, cast Splinter Storm and Nourish, kill enemies using the wide arc slash of Shattered Lash to trigger just about everything. Then when your duration is starting to get low on Splinter Storm, cast Mass Vitrify and use the arc attack of Shattered Lash to break the entire ring at once. This then shovels more damage into your Splinter Storm whilst also refreshing the timer. Keep doing this as you play. The longer that you go, your Splinter Storm will just start passively killing everything that gets close to you. So combining that with the killing power of Lash, you have a crazy tanky frame with 90% damage reduction, permanent uptime on health regen, easy energy regen, and enormous damage. She genuinely has the whole package. Frames that kill effectively and efficiently without the need for weapons such as, Gara, Wukong, Exgal, Atlas, they are phenomenal for our endgame modes. As soon as you see one of them appear, you have an instant pick regardless of whatever the weapons you are given, and whether they're trash or not. I love when I see Gara appear in EDA or in ETA. It is pretty much an insta-lock-in. It's a brilliant frame. She is so easy to play, but when played very, very, very well, can absolutely slaughter any content we put her in right now. So I hope you enjoyed my look at Gara Prime since the recent changes. I have a fun build coming in the next video. It is very silly, but a whole load of fun to play. But for now, many thanks for watching. I hope you have a fantastic week, and I shall catch you in the next video.